Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, in England. I'm looking at a book from Australia today. It's called Health and Safety Law in Victoria, now in the 4th edition. It's a very popular book, been written by two people, Breen, Creighton and Peter Rozen. And the book has come to us from the Federation Press. Now, the reason I was interested in this book in the first place is over here, and we'll look at it in a minute, is because health and safety is such an important international issue. And every day you pick up the newspapers, you'll find something there probably involving a health and safety issue because of the expanding population we have on the earth, and also the fact that there have to be some standards which are maintained, otherwise we would all frankly fall into some form of anarchy. Now, Elizabeth and I talked about this book. I did the first draft and she did the second draft, and that's how we've produced the actual work. The title we've given our book review is Involved in Health and Safety Matters Down Under? Well, check out the new 4th edition of this definitive work. Let's have a look at it first of all. It's a paperback, blue cover, there we go, paperback there. You can see the spine, and then there's quite a lot of detail on the back. It runs to something approaching 500 pages. The actual index is a detailed index with paragraph numbering at the back. At the front, you've got quite a lot of information. There's the front page itself. Then you've got, there's a foreword by the Honourable Justice Chris Maxwell, which is very helpful to read right at the beginning. There's the main blurb. And then there is the foreword by Maxwell. And then after that, and that's dated June 2017, I'm recording this in the summer of 2017, there's the contents section there. And then you can see that runs through again. And then, in fact, there are a total of 16 chapters. Then the bibliography is at the back. Then there's a detailed preface which explains that a lot of things have been going on in Australia concerning occupational health and safety regulations. Whatever you call them, it's still basically the same stuff, and that is it's health and safety. Now, the table of cases is quite substantial. And then you've got, of course, the legislation, the statutes, of course, which are covered as well. We, of course, have our own, as you know, our own statutes here in the United Kingdom, the Health and Safety at Work legislation. It's very useful to have an abbreviations section in the contents. And this list is very helpful because I, for one, will not know some of the abbreviations that are being used, and I'm sure many people don't. So it's always very useful to have a guide as to what's actually there. Then the contents itself. It starts off with the content of the book. You see there's the paragraph numbering at the side, and then you've got a lot of footnoting all the way through, just opening it in the middle. General duty of employers to employees. Again, the standard tortious liability issue apart from anything else, but it's much more, of course, than that. And, of course, our health and safety legislation, which is enshrined in law by legislation, as well as the case law, of course, has arisen through the Industrial Revolution and, of course, the pressure, I think, to a certain extent from the trade union movement and others to make sure that the workplace is safe. But it's more than that, of course, today. So what do we say about the book? We say, well, as the world is fast becoming one big jurisdiction, more or less, this new edition of the definitive work on health and safety law in the jurisdiction of Victoria and Australia will certainly be interesting, I think, to quite a wide readership. That's why we're reviewing the book. I think probably it offers an interesting opportunity for comparative lawyers to compare, in this case, the attendant problems of health and safety in Victoria with those in England and Wales. And as I say, it's of interest because of jurisdictions within the common law system itself throughout the world. And the first edition of this, what is now long established work, came out in 1986 when the world in many respects was somewhat different. Since the previous edition appeared in 2007, again from the Federation Press, further legislative developments have taken place, and the ramifications and consequences of which are summarised in the author's preface, which is, as I say, well worth reading to get an idea of setting the scene of where we are today. And speaking of comparative law, the two authors, Breen, Creighton and Peter Rozen, mention an important influence in the development of health and safety over the past decade, as they refer to the case law emerging from the UK, where the law has, at least until recently, been heavily influenced by developments in the EU. Of course, we're leaving the EU, so I don't know what that will happen. Fear not, the legislation will remain under the Great Repeal Bill, because the whole purpose of the Great Repeal Act, as it will become, unless it's defeated, will be to enshrine in English law those laws that we have from the European Union. It's a small world indeed then, a good thing too, as it's been an uphill battle over the decades to legislate for the perpetually fragile rights of employees just about anywhere, to decent standards of health and safety in the workplace, and to enforce those rights. And as I've indicated, I think partly they're creatures of the need through the unions to have proper safeguards for work. And the authors voice more than a few strong opinions on the continuingly thorny problems of enforcement. And there is the rub, if you like. That's where the problem lies, I think, in Britain as well as probably in Australia, actually the issue of the enforcement. It would appear that the expression of fierce, probably dissenting opinions in a standard legal text is an ever so slightly stronger tradition, possibly in Australia, than, say, in England and Wales. And writing in the foreword, the President of the Victoria Court of Appeal, that's Justice Chris Maxwell, emphasises the view of the authors that the law can and should do more, as the levels of work-related injury, illness and death remain unacceptably high. Very good point. That's why we've got this stuff in the first place. They chide the painfully slow progress to national uniformity across Australia's 9 jurisdictions. Again, different structure, but still the same common problems, and demand better performance from the regulator in investigation, inspection and enforcement. And I think probably we could say the same thing about the Health and Safety Executive here in England and Wales. And when you take the national tag off any country, people are basically the same, and they've got the same problems, only we use different words to describe what those problems are. I certainly found that when I was in North America, and I'm sure that's the case in Australia. And of course this book certainly covers all the salient aspects of the legislation. It's too detailed to list here in this short review, but to name a few, they include inspection, criminal enforcement, personal liability, victimisation, and of course much more. Let me conclude, as no Australian lawyer can do without this book, it is probable that few international lawyers can do without it either, especially those with Australian colleagues and or links with Australia-based law firms. So for lawyers anywhere, including academic lawyers, we think this book is an enlightening read, so do get it. I've certainly found it interesting. That's why when I saw it, I thought that's a book we should definitely review. So thank you very much to Federation Press. The publication date is stated as at July 2017. Here's the book again. It's a paperback, front, side and the back. Just opening it in the middle. The other general duties, protection of persons other than employees. And again, that's another important area that, as I said, because it's a creature partly of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, and certainly in England and Wales, I think the important thing to bear in mind is it's not just about employees, it's about everybody. I mean, one of the things we've been having problems with recently, for instance, in health and safety, is the appalling problems of transportation, and the fact that health and safety laws seem to go out of the window when one is using the railway system in London, for instance. Anyway, I'd like to thank everybody concerned for this book, and also Federation Press for sending it to us. I think it's an important read and a great contribution to where we are today nationally and internationally, whichever part of the world you live in. Thank you to all. Bye-bye.